It is better to be hated for what you are than loved for what you are not.
What does that mean to you?
Well, I teach authenticity. So for me, in my book, I teach attachment, atonement, attunement, presence, and congruence. And congruence is deciding who you want to be and then having the personal integrity to be that person. You know, there's a beautiful quote, personal integrity is who you are when nobody's looking. You know, but you have to understand, like, it's a privilege to live in that society, to live in a society where we have the opportunity, the freedom to make those decisions. We're not running from, dinosaurs or bears. You know, you can decide to be an attorney. You can decide to be a psychotherapist, and then you can do. So that's what the whole book is about. So Winnicott in the '60s, and I'm paraphrasing in my own contemporary language, we create a false self, a facade, a persona to survive our childhood and get our emotional needs met through breadcrumbs, essentially. You know, in my generation, I'm twice your age. So
you don't look twice my age. You have more hair than I do.
I think that's the measure of age, but
okay, fair enough.
So yeah, that's the problem. I mean, Eliot wrote 100 years ago in Prufrock, we create a face to meet the faces that we meet. And so again, I've been teaching these courses on authenticity, and the only thing that makes a relationship work is being authentic. And the only thing that correlates strongly with happiness, which has also, been a main study of mine, is the ability to be authentic. Because you don't want to trick someone into liking your outer self. And this is a funny thing, and I'll just go into it and then come back. You know, I have this, I don't know what to call it, like a sick fantasy about two people who met on Match.com.
Sure.
And at their wedding, they have to announce the other person's photos that attracted them. Well, I'm marrying Bruce because he has six-pack ab and he jumped out of an airplane and he shoots tigers on safari.
Sure.
I'm marrying Barbara because she was holding a Gucci handbag on Rodeo Drive and she did handstand on the beach. And
she's so spiritual and awake. Yeah.
So again, that's like the epitome, whether it's Instagram or TikTok, any type of social media, where you're putting this most incredibly false self out there. And then the adage is, you shouldn't measure your insides by someone else's outsides because, we're all just showing each other our highlight reels on the internet. In the book, I say that America is a giant resentment factory because we...
You say that's in this book?
I do. This is because we seduce people into liking our false self, and then we resent them for not loving our unseemly inner self. So
that's good. So would you start out a date or a conversation immediately
coming out? That's the interesting thing about dating today. Because, well, there's two things. One is that when I was your age, I had this crazy sense of wonder. So I was like, you like ballet? Like, take me to ballet. Yeah. I know nothing about ballet, right?
Sure.
And now at 58, people, I feel, are looking for red flags. They have this list of things that are just like, I can't work with that. And so if you have a sense of wonder, then you're open. So to answer your question, what I feel is the problem in dating is that you want authenticity, but if it happens before trust is built, then you scare the shit out of the other person. So it's this very subtle dance that you have to do. Well, what I'd love to start with is a title of an aphorism by Nietzsche. So that's 130 years ago. And he says, how our faith in God will become a faith in science. And then Thomas Kuhn in late 1960s said that the paradigm shifts every 25 years in science, right? And then because of the internet, and I think we're living in hyperspeed, and we have all of these new definitions and terms, and we subscribe to them, and then we don't, and we kind of forget about them. I mean, the classic example is in 1973 in the DSM, homosexuality was listed as a
psychological
disorder.
Disorder,
problem.
Impairment or something.
And now the problem, I think, is the medications and just the prevalency, and then the pharmaceutical companies saying they're not physically addictive, but psychologically, once you don't have that feeling of anxiety or depression, like you don't want to risk, like meditation, might not work. It's certainly not going to work every day. So, okay, so let's go back to your question. So existentialism, for me, this is what I've been studying, and the end point, it will be like why we think the shit that we think, because that's what interests me and what's in our subconsciouses. But the beginning point, a lot of people start with Kierkegaard philosophically, but I think that Hegel in the phenomenology of spirit, when he discusses, it's essentially awareness of awareness, right?
That's awareness of being self-aware.
Yeah,
something of that nature.
Yeah, to know that you're thinking. Like my cat doesn't say, "I know I'll be hungry in an hour," right? Word, right? It's like it's very present oriented, and we're the only animal. Well, I guess squirrels put away nuts for the winter or something, but like in general, like we're not here. We're not here now. And in the first book,
not for me, that's for sure.
In the first book, that's why I study these systems of thought. And I was so moved. There's this video of Scott Galloway talking at the summit, and he's so self-deprecating because at the very end he says, it's such a shame, on my deathbed, Ed, I'll know that I was never really present. And he talks about like going to the World Cup with his sons and taking a selfie so that he can virtue signal that he's a good father, but he's actually thinking about like the podcast he's doing in 2 weeks, and it's just like this whole thing. So meditation is, to me, is the only way to know that you can be present if you subscribe to that paradigm. I mean, there's a whole other paradigm of plant medicines and drugs and things. But, I think all those things have ramifications. And, if you want to do, essentially there's a Buddhist adage, it is one mountain, many paths. So for me, DMT is the rocket ship up the mountain. Ayahuasca is the helicopter. Psilocybin and MDMA are the cars. And then yoga and meditation are walking up the mountain. And so let's bring this back to existentialism, and then we'll talk about like spirituality. So for me, I studied philosophy for some time, and Nietzsche is the most interesting to answer the questions that you pose, because he destroyed Christianity, for various reasons. And when he said God is dead, the Christian God is dead. And then from the people who I studied with, you should create your life as if you're creating a work of art. And the same thing for your other questions regarding relationships. There's a quote that's not from Nietzsche, but from someone who I'm pretty sure studied him, and he says, "Life is meaningless, and it's meaningless that it's meaningless."
Life is meaningless, and it's meaningless that it's meaningless.
So,
okay, I like that.
So, we have that responsibility, and this is now threading Nietzsche through Heidegger through Sartre, to that freedom. Sartre said, "Man is condemned to be free, condemned to be free," and with that comes great responsibility. Right? To if you want to use the paradigm, leave the world a better place than you entered it, or be of service to others, or, make a family, or, be the best at this or that, things like that. There's a responsibility in the freedom that you and I, in terms of human evolution, are experiencing. The reason that I don't allow my mind to devolve into nihilism is because, as I wrote in that book, and this is just based on Foucault's work, I'm interested in systems of thought that influence the way we think. So the way you discuss your phone immediately triggers the word slavery in my head. Like you are a slave to that thing being, putting this facade out there. Oh, I got to do this. I got to do that. I got to do this. And if it's a slavery, then I want to emancipate myself.
Sure.
I want to be free rather than just go, and then drink a bottle of wine at night,
and then fall asleep, and you're back in the same rat race tomorrow.
Right,
sure.
I know. I feel like a lot of people are more people are opting out in some ways, and because we're all pawns of whether it's big pharma or Facebook and Instagram, or, like we don't realize how manipulated we've become, and that we're actually what is I forget it, Jaron Lanier, he says like we are the product, like we think we're in charge, but we're actually like being sold.
Yeah, we're the consumers.
But we're not the consumers because it's like there's forced choices. Like we think we all want this handbag because we want affinity grouping. We want people to like us, so we drive this type of car, or we do this, or we vacation in this place, and then we tell people, oh yes, I'm going here, and I stayed at this hotel, and I flew this way. And it's so subtle to me, and I think I'm too sensitive. A woman last week said, "Oh, I can't meet you at LACMA. We're going to the Hollywood Bowl. There's 4 of us. We have a box."
You're like, what does that have to do with the Hollywood Bowl?
And if I called her up and it said, "I'm going to New York next week. I'm flying first class," she'd be like, "You're a fucking dick," right? But so why did she add that in?
Sure.
I mean, it could have been out of pure joy or something.
Yeah, sure.
But I still think that there's this weird because we're all rich technically. We're all these people. Everybody is in the top 17% of the world. 3.5 billion people live on less than $1.90 a day. Sure.
People can access this podcast and listen to it on their phones. I mean,
that's
we're wealthy.
Insane.
We're wealthy that we can have
wealthy.
that. Of course.
So. That's the way people figure out their tribe in a way, right? So they say these things in order to. They say, "Oh, I go to Equinox. Oh, I'm at LA Fitness. We can't be friends, because we know Equinox is $350 a month and LA Fitness is $49. So how can we ever be friends? No, it's fucking stupid.
No, it's crazy.
Or you eat at this place, or you eat at that place, and. The funniest thing for me is, and you're going to edit this out, but this is Air One. It's created this this lounge
tribalism between.
but there's this every patient of mine who comes in carrying an Air One cup tells me simultaneously that it's the most delicious thing they ever had, and it's also so expensive.
Yeah.
And I've never heard anyone talk about Air One without talking about
how expensive it is. Because they want to let you know how much they spend on things.
I would be embarrassed. I would feel stupid if I said, "Hey, check out these shoes, $800." I'd be like, "I'm a fucking idiot." It's just it doesn't make sense to me, and it's also. There's a vulgarity to try to relate to people because you're wealthy. I feel, and for me, I love talking about art. I love talking about literature. I love talking about. I saw incredible music this week. I went to the Baked Potato on Thursday night. I went to last week. That was at the Hammer. There was music. Friday night. I saw Joshua White play. Thursday night was Danny Janklow, and it's just like there's a vibe and a feeling and
a spirit to it.
Yeah, the people I went with, I don't even think I understand how jazz has evolved, but when I see the passion with which these people on stage communicate with each other and their vocabulary and the way that there was this. Xylophonist on Friday, and Joshua White would play a note, and he would just, like that, and again, I'm not smart enough, but there's just this thing that happens. It's actually there's a book on this that talks about Wittgenstein and Lacan and astonishment, and for me, I like to study all these things because I'm seeking to be astonished, because I don't want to kind of just be resigned to my paradigm and being like, I teach that language is a cage. Right. So to answer this is a wraparound.
And it actually goes back to what you were saying about your wonder, right? You always have that lust for wonder, the sense of wonder.
Right. And if you just say, it's a funny thing, when people talk, you nod your head and things agree with your paradigm or they disagree. And that's what's fascinating to me about my pedagogical method. When I teach, I have to build trust with someone, which is usually done through like storytelling in some way. Everyone loves Once Upon a Time.
Sure.
So, and then at some point in time, you can rock their world with saying something like, oh, language is a cage. Like you're a prisoner or you're a slave to Instagram. But if I just walk into a room and say, life is meaningless, people be like, fuck off. I didn't pay $800
this guy's
for that.
Lost his mind. He's doing too much yoga.
Right, exactly. So that's what I'm kind of fascinated by now. Because again, I want to learn new things, and we're all super prejudiced and biased, and we need to learn to see through new lenses, even if we disagree with them. And if you want to wrap that around to the fucked up conundrum or dialectic or problem in America today, is because we basically think, like, Republicans think that people like me are ignorant and Democrats we look down our noses and think that they're uneducated or whatnot.
Sure.
And so until we can sit with each other and not think the other person's a fucking idiot, we're moving towards a civil war.
Sure.
One school of thought is we're all in this together, meaning that if I am super wealthy and I know that all these people are super poor, I need a gated community, and I need a guard, and I need a buzzer, and I need a ring, and I need this, because they're going to want to steal from me. So I think the problem that we're really experiencing in America in particular is this rise in self-interest. Like we're becoming
more of selfish human beings, human species.
It's actually self-interest, and there's been all these articles on the Silicon Valley people now voting right wing, because it's fascinating to me. Low-income people think in terms of hourly wage.
Okay.
Middle-class people think in terms of salary.
Sure.
And then wealthy people think in terms of net worth.
Sure.
So you don't ask, whoever he is, how much you earn an hour, and you don't ask the guy who works at the 99-cent store what's your net worth.
Yeah.
Right. So we conceptualize our way of being, and then the beautiful phrase, the map is not the territory. So all I have is
the map. Map is not the territory.
Meaning that I have a map in my head of reality, right? And it is incredibly different from Julian, who's 30 years younger than me, who's an attorney, all these things. And I have to acknowledge that. We don't all agree that this is reality. For the guy who works in a 99-cent store, an hourly wage is reality. For Elon Musk, net worth is his reality.
So how have you seen, going back to existentialism and what we just talked about, of what tribalism has implanted in our society in such a strong...
I got to flip that immediately. So I think that our brain is hardwired
to be tribal.
Right. To know 140, 150 faces and names, and to trust those people.
Fair.
And then we do this thing because since the Industrial Revolution, and we grew, all the things that we think are normal in 100 years won't exist, or even we won't. We might not. But nuclear family, things like that. So if you look back on the Industrial Revolution and cities, it's a bunch of strangers living together. So when they meet each other, they have to say certain things. So they're in their mind, they're like friend or foe, friend or foe, friend or foe, right? And then in our neighborhood, like you do this thing that I call hovering, where you're like, oh, can I eat it? Can I fuck it? Can I make money from it? Like you're like, so it's just like this crazy hovering thing where you don't want to commit. Like you don't want to be Me Too. You don't want to say like nice blouse. You can't say that anymore. You can't, so you just have to like, then there's this thing that happens.
You're putting out feelers to see which way.
Yeah. But it's also, it's not working. That's for damn sure. but it's not. I mean, it's not working for anybody. But it's a very interesting time because what the internet has done is explode the shared or agreed upon, like this is reality and this is what the man does and this is what the woman does. And now everything's amorphous and there are no guardrails and you could, mixed metaphors, step on a landmine at any time, meaning that like that's a red flag to this person. Like for me, when someone says, oh, we're going to the Hollywood Bowl, we have a box. We're not of the same tribe.
We're not hanging out.
Right. I'm not. I wouldn't because I wouldn't
tell somebody.
It's just vulgar.
Yeah.
It's
sure.
just it's
sure.
So it's but that's what everyone does all the time. Whether you're standing in line at the Primo Paso or whatever, you turn around and you're like Jets. I love the Jets or whatever. You like boxing.
Sure.
I mean, I think we're tribal, and it's not a bad thing, but we live in these urban centers, and so we're constantly kind of checking to see if we're going to get fucked or not.
If it's going to fuck us or not.
Okay, you can edit that out.
No, you're allowed to say it's the truth.
We haven't even started the interview.
It's the truth.
There's like 20 questions.
I do have a ton of questions for you.
The barometer against which I hold everything is if this person were living in a tribe on a desert island, would they be suffering from ADHD or do they need to be medicated for these things? And so what are the systems of thought in our society, and how hooked in are we to those things? That's what fundamentalism is when you believe that that's the fundamental reality. And I saw Yuval Harari speak, and he's like, it's all just stories, whether it's the Iranians wanting to kill the people in Israel or the Israelis.
Oh,
he said that he just said everything's a story. Why are these cultures at war? They're at war because they have different stories, essentially. And so language creates reality. And if your language is this language, and in that language is we're better than the animals, so we can kill them all, and we're better than these type of people because they believe in this thing, that's what starts wars. So for me, again, so you're saying that sometimes it devolves to nihilism, where you're just like, oh, life is meaningless, why should I get out of bed and put on, wash my face?
Or it's like the more self-aware you become, the sadder you become because you're seeing your bad actions.
Well, what I say is that the foible of human consciousness is a dialectic. And there's this quote by F. Scott Fitzgerald says the measure of a first-rate intelligence is the ability to hold opposite thoughts in the mind at the same time and retain the ability to act. So that's anti-nihilism, retain the ability to act. So for me, knowing that on the one hand, this is all fucking bullshit, and I have to play 150%. I do want to stand there in front of Joshua White, watch him play this thing that I don't understand, and then watch the xylophones do this thing where he's shocked that he played like a diminished 11th chord over a major thing, and I don't understand that, but I'm just like, whoa, that was fucking cool, right? It's like watching a rocket ship go up in space. I can't just tell you how that happens, but I'm like, that's fucking cool, right? Astonishment.
100%.
So
Wonder.
that brings meaning to my life. I mean, that's what I've learned for my own personal growth, and you were asking about relationships and then existential philosophy and psychology. So I will tie this around to existential psychology by saying We do have, as Jonathan Haidt writes about, this anxious generation because of technology and because of the way it's messed up all of our brains where we think we have to check these things. I just made my iPhone pad black and white. My iPhone screen black and white, and
like a just full black and white.
Full black and white. And the reason is because a friend, one of my students said, all the colors are those of ripe fruit on your screen. And so, like, as an animal, primordially, I fucking didn't get it. You say it.
Primordially.
Good, you said it.
Am I saying it right?
Yes.
Okay.
We're attracted. Our eyes want those oranges and yellows and reds and whatever. So there's some kind of study done. I'm trying it out. I don't know. What I'm saying is that you get dopamine hits that you don't realize because your mind is saying ripe fruit all the time. So you're going back to the screen more than you normally would. I don't know. I started. I started yesterday, but it's a fascinating concept. Again, I want to learn more things. And am I addicted to colors? The way I'm addicted to salt, the way I'm addicted to sugar, the way
That's interesting. So you, even as a psychologist, are still practicing things in your own life
every day.
Every day. What other things?
I tried boxing a couple of years ago.
Okay.
I tried, and then I took during the pandemic I took up tennis. Never played.
I love
really.
playing tennis.
And then I've been swimming for 2 years. I lost 40 pounds, and I'm just like I feel really. It's like a meditation for me.
Wow.
And it's very. It gives me like a feeling of accomplishment. I got one of those. I'm not advertising, but one of those Garmin watches. So it's like you did 750 yards this morning. You did whatever. So I'm like,
so you're addicted to achievement.
Yes, but I'm very conscious of. Again, it's like little victories. I'm not trying to run a marathon. I know that. It's like the Matrix when I can't say his last name, Joey, whatever. It's the red and the blue pill. Like when he's
has a pick between.
But he's eating a steak,
sure,
and he's like, I know it's an illusion, but I love the taste. So for us, it's choosing your illusion. Saying, okay, listen. I know that life is meaningless, but it actually gives me great satisfaction to help other people, to teach, to make someone who hasn't had the opportunities that me as a white Jewish male with an Ivy League degree like has. So to be able to sit with anybody, younger or older, and just tell them,
have these conversations. Okay, I'm gonna ask.
Let's
That's
start
a perfect,
the interview.
Now the conversations begin.
Let's start.
Okay, so I'm gonna ask you about modern relationships.
So the major problem today, again, the map is not the territory. So we have language and we have to be able to communicate with our intimate partners. I love Brene Brown, the way she checks in with her husband when they come home from work. She's like, I'm at a 2. Like don't expect anything from me tonight. Like I'm just white, and they trade off like that, as opposed to just making assumptions like, oh yes, we show up and this happens.
It's 50-50.
Right.
Yeah.
It's not that. Yeah. So you have to come to agreement on, again, to answer your other question, how much freedom you need and how much like self-time and how much time do you want to learn, and then how much do you want to share. And I think that in couples, people should have their own passions that they share with people, the way I was talking about jazz. And then they should have shared things, like they go to yoga together, they go bowling together, they take walks on the beach together. And it's this dance where you're like, okay, you have 3 hours to take a painting class on Saturday and I'm going to go swimming, something like that.
So you believe that you can be free in a symbiotic relationship?
Absolutely. Yeah.
You definitely can, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I think sometimes people think I think being in an individual relationship with yourself and then coming together as two partners is really the goal.
Yeah.
But some people believe that sometimes you need to be dependent in some sense, or else if you're too free, you're not really invested or devoted to that partner or to the relationship. Is that true?
No, absolutely not. And, this is from my own paradigm, like codependence, which to me means that your emotional state depends on someone else's. is not a great thing. You know, you can empathize with your partner. You can want to facilitate their greatness and create the preconditions. They love roses, so you bring them roses, like not brain surgery. That is one of the most fascinating things that I go through with couples regarding tools for creating a wonderful relationship. Knowing what you like to, what receive in terms of a love language, and knowing what you prefer to give, and then talking about it with your partner, and then being able to meet them where they are. So I actually, this is a horrible story, so I won't tell it really, but
but I'm gonna bring it up. It's a horrible
I had
story,
somebody
sure.
buy his wife like a $7,000 watch for the anniversary, and she just looked at it and she was like return it. It just means nothing to me, you know, and because gifts are not her love language,
Sure.
right? So,
And he didn't know that now that he's been married to her
right,
for
right,
however
and
many
it was
years?
like she wanted quite quality time, you know. And so you have to actually just look someone in the eye and say, like, you know, like if you do this, I would like to, you know, I'd like to wear a watch and say my husband gave it to her my husband gave it to me for our anniversary, but that doesn't feel good either, you know.
Sure.
So I'd rather that we just like take that money and go on vacation. No, it's a learned skill. Like you have a default, and you have to meet your partner where they're at.
Interesting. With that, can you share some practices or exercise that individuals or couples can use to enhance authenticity
The first one,
within the relationships?
you have to learn reflective listening and mirroring and matching. So the quote from the first book that everyone loves is mirror.
Wired and Tired.
No, first book is How to Survive.
How to Survive. Good job.
Mirror neurons do not fire via text message. So mirror neurons mean that your facial affect is mirroring the other person's.
Okay.
If you're crying and I'm sitting there like this, like we're not connecting and your mirror neurons are not firing, and vice versa.
Sure.
So for couples, I have them sit down on Sunday night and just reflect back. Like someone told me this wonderful thing 2 weeks ago. It's rose, thorn, bud. All kids know this, you know. So the rose is like some good thing that happened to you during the week. The thorn is some bad thing that happened to you during the week, and the bud is like something you're looking forward to in the future.
Okay.
So
It's like this is the State of the Union. Is this kind of like the idea behind it?
No,
or
it's being able
being reflective in
to
your-
validate the other person's emotional experience.
Okay.
So in most of our interactions with other human beings, our emotions are not validated or they're invalidated. And so with your intimate partner, you should actually work to validate their emotional experience. You know, not be indulgent. My phrase is relationships are therapeutic. They should not be therapy.
therapeutic. They should not be therapy. Interesting.
So, but you cut out this time. I like Sunday night. I don't know why. You do rose, thorn, bud. As I said, I just learned it 2 weeks ago. And the other person says, "Oh, so if I hear you correctly, the rose for you this week was when we got pizza at Mile and Olive. Is that did I get that right?" And the other person mirrors your affect. You know, like when they reflect that back. So and also matches your body form. So it's like
you have to be staring at each other, sitting down.
Yeah, it doesn't
in a
work by
comfortable
a text message.
You can't be driving and having a conversation.
No, it's like it's really sitting down, phones off, eyeball to eyeball, maybe holding hands if that's not too intimate.
For your partner.
I don't want to freak people out here.
Yeah, there's
you know,
quality.
I know.
There's quality time, but there's also physical touch there as well.
For your generation, there's that quote: people are changing their passwords more often than they're having sex. Yeah. Statistically, so holding hands might be a little much for your partner.
For our new generation. Wow.
For a new generation.
Yeah.
But the tools are validating your partner's emotional experience, whether you agree with it or disagree with it, doesn't matter. And that's the fucked up thing about men. And people hate when I say this.
They don't like when you call them men, women.
Right? No. But what I'm saying, like, there's a beautiful quote by Harville Hendricks. He says, "You only have one choice in this life. You can either be right or you can be in a relationship." And we have this drive to be right, and we want to. I see this all the time, where want to get in the last word, want to be right, and it's lethal to relationships. And I'm like, dude, you are your own worst enemy. Like, so I teach my guys, take your tongue, put it on the roof of your mouth, behind your front teeth, and just say, don't talk. Don't talk. Don't talk.
But you have to be actively listening, though, right?
Yeah, active listening. And then at the end, you reflect back. So if I hear you correctly, you were really upset when I left my shoes in the hallway.
Yeah.
Did I get that right?
Yeah.
And don't make it a joke. Just like whatever her face is, if she's crying, you're like, oh, that's the shoes in the hallway. I'm sorry. You know, just like, yeah. But that's
Sure.
how the shit works. You know, when people can empathize with you rather than sympathize. The tap out when emotions rise, and you essentially, in my understanding, you become. When you're dysregulated, you are your wounded child. And so all children want to be...
Wait, let me just pause you for... When you're dysregulated, you are your wounded child. Can you elaborate on... How do you become dysregulated?
Children have to learn how to control their emotions, right? And adults, that's like, we learn language and we control our emotions. So you don't see a lot of people out on Sunset Boulevard right now crying or screaming.
Well, actually...
then the police come. That's by the beach. So... when you're in a couple and someone does name calling or does something contemptuous, or they're showing that contempt, they're actually their wounded child, and because we all want to be loved unconditionally, and in the world that we were thrown into, we learn that we can only be loved conditionally. And this relates to you picking up the phone in the morning, or Scott Galloway virtue signaling. And like, we all are getting fucking breadcrumbs. We want to be loved unconditionally. We can't. And so we get rich.
We have to provide value, so we get some condition of love.
Conditional love.
Yeah.
Right. And that and again, that's a resentment factory, because then you trick someone and you're like, oh, you wouldn't even fucking be here if I didn't have a Lamborghini. Or you wouldn't be here if I didn't wear this type of underwear.
Aloe's really soft underwear, though. I'm just letting you know, in case you're looking for any soft ones.
Is that a product placement?
No,
I thought we were just doing this.
Just Melrose. But it's interesting when you talk about the tap out, when you talk about this
reflective listening, mirroring and matching,
and being we are a wounded child when we're dysregulated. I mean,
right?
How does how do we all of a sudden switch on and off like that? I just don't understand.
Because you get triggered. You get triggered, and as soon as it's so unbelievable. Like, essentially, and listen, our parents did the best they could with the tools they had at the time, and yet they installed this series of triggers by saying, like, stop crying, use a fork, do this, and the way you learned how to be a productive member of society has these psychological ramifications.
Interesting.
So later in life, you get triggered and you don't realize that whether it's this image or this sound or something, and then you're dysregulated. And that's why I teach people to tap out, so the other person can tell them, listen, you're not showing up as your highest self right now. So we're going to take a half an hour and then we're going to revisit this issue. It's so fascinating to me, and it's a great question, because, as I said with dating, it's the same thing, where there's this trust, and you can't gauge it. So if you're too authentic or too vulnerable too quickly, and the trust isn't built, it just scares the other person. And then on the other hand, you do want that, but it's this very, very fine dance that we all have to learn how to do organically and in the moment. That's the problem. So there's no secret except for being present and like thinking about it in your mind, saying, is it okay? We've been together for a year. Should I talk about this thing? And that's why I love being a psychotherapist, because and I fuck up sometimes because
in your own relationships.
No, as a psychotherapist, because I'll ask questions when the trust isn't established.
Interesting.
And it's funny, there's sometimes where it's like a minute, whether it's like we went to the same schools or, you're just like, hey, Pro-Keds, I got Pro-Keds, I'm wearing Pro-Keds, dope, right? and we're members of the same tribe,
Sure.
and we're the Pro-Ked tribe, and trust is established. And then there's other people, I don't want to talk about it too much. There's a guy who came in who talked about, we talked about politics for a fucking year. Mm-hmm. And then after that year, he confessed something that was just a horrible thought, and then he never came again. And it was so that I had to go back and process that year about talking about politics was just trust building, and he just wanted somebody who would normalize this one horrible thought, and then he didn't need psychotherapy. It was beautiful, but I didn't know at the time. Like I didn't say, oh, we're going to sit here for a year and build trust by talking about our common, political things for a year.
Yeah,
and then.
But he would ask for your own views and beliefs as well, or he just would
tell
you his.
Yeah. Okay. But that's a trust building process.
Yeah, that's true.
That it's mirroring and matching,
you're right.
like that we're of the same tribe.
So psychotherapy also you have to, as a psychologist, be involved in the talk therapy.
It's a very fine line, a razor's edge you have to walk. So they have this thing for the past 20, 30 years called relational therapy. Mm-hmm. On the other hand, if you look at people who are disbarred or delicensed, or I don't know what the word is,
disbarred,
they'll say, "Oh, she talked too much about herself. She told me personal things that I didn't need to know." So, in terms of the scientific paradigm of what psychotherapy is, we're supposed to be like a blank slate, and you shouldn't know anything. I mean, actually, this podcast technically could destroy my career.
Why?
Because I'm relating things, and then people will come in and say like, oh, I saw you on Julian's podcast, and you said this thing about men and this and that. And
so because people are starting to know who you are, how you believe, and what you feel.
They can't. You're not a top.
But you're a teacher though too. I mean, I can't imagine.
Which is really difficult. It's a very difficult thing to navigate when I am, because the funny thing is that I believe that humor and like existentialism and like Nietzsche's writing and there is a component where when I teach, I say there are three entranceways into the subconscious: comedy and magic and dreams. And
comedy, magic, dreams.
And the reason comedy is jokes are so important, and it's the same as magic, but you don't realize it, is there's a setup, and then there's you're pointing someone in the wrong direction, and then there's a payoff. And so the way that's astonishment, and the humans, my cat doesn't laugh, right? Like humans, we laugh because we're trying to bridge that gap of what we think we should have known but didn't. That's the when the payoff comes after we've been misdirected, and that's how magic works too, right? So what I think is, if I say, he's as dumb as a blank, your mind goes through like 50 things, right? And if I say something that is one of those things, it's not funny. And then if I say something that's outside, like the moon or something, it's also not funny. But there's this margin where I'm going to say something and you're going to say, oh, I should have thought of that, and laugh because you didn't. That's what laughter is. And there are books on the philosophy of laughter and the philosophy of jokes that don't say that. But that's the kind of thing that interests me. Why is this funny to some people and obviously not funny to other people? And being out there in the public and writing these books and writing 500 articles and putting out these videos, it's super fascinating to see. I don't engage with people who people write horrible things, and people write wonderful things. And it's like, I have a philosophy. It's taken me these 40 years, and I'm putting it out there as a teacher. And it is, I'm not for everyone. You know,
You're for the existential bro, though. I will tell
but
you.
I've lived a colorful life, and in terms of our society, you know, like, you know, I don't the scientific paradigm. I am not, you know, like the old guy with the pipe sitting there saying like, how does that make you feel? You know, I'm just not my thing.
Yeah.
I'm more of a relational, you know, like directive person. Your last question was like, when you're in the moment, how do you reframe things?
How do you refrain
so
from
the word,
deregulation?
the phrase is pattern interrupts.
Pattern interrupts.
Pattern interrupts. So your partner and you have established a dynamic.
Okay.
Right? And the only way to change it is to show your partner something different, to not react in the way. And this is why jokes are so important, right? Because
That's true.
like there's you've set up this way of being for your partner. And you have to be able to grow and expand and evolve. And the reason relationships work is because people grow, expand, and evolve at similar rates, you know? And if someone gets totally into one thing and leaves the other person in the dust and doesn't want to share it, it puts a real strain on the relationship. So again, to go back to the first question, you have to show your partner the ability to show up in an unexpected way. Like more loving, more vulnerable, more authentic. So that's the first question. So that's why you need to communicate. When your partner sends you to the store and you're just like, oh, I'll pick up ice cream, I know she likes vanilla. That's horrifying. You got to call her, say, I'm at the store. No, you want chocolate or vanilla or pistachio or whatever. Because we all make assumptions about people, and people change, people grow, and we have to communicate with them to say, yes, you know, I used to like that, but now I like this. And again, you have to be able to throw a monkey wrench into the engine and stop things and say, oh, wow, that's really interesting. And let's talk about this. And next time I won't make that assumption. And so, you know, I'll bring you tulips instead of roses, or, you know, if you like tulips now. The joke that just came in my head is it takes a lot of preparation to be spontaneous.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying.
I know.
So you're not going to roll your partner of the spontaneity of your love, right? I mean,
it's very interesting. Because I feel as if the best we can ever do, whether you're a poet or you're in a relationship, is create the preconditions for magic to happen. Like the jazz guys that I saw last week, and then have astonishment if it does. You know, so that's why I love magic so much, because
so you're also going to magic shows too, or?
I love magic, yeah, because it's you know, it shows you the limitations of our senses, and we're just always tricked, you know, to understand that reality. All of this, you know, like there weren't these lights 200 years ago, and in 200 years they're going to find that these cause cancer. We could have lived to 500. Everything that we fucking believe is wrong and stupid, and so the fundamentalists are the ones who really double down and be like, no, this is the way reality is. Like that's the problem. Like we'll live in a better society when we're relativistic and we say this is bullshit, like asphalt, or that we can fly or we can't fly or whatever, or the world is flat or the world is round, you know? So I don't know. That's the way I think of existentialism and why it's important in our lives today. Because when you understand that, like and again, Nietzsche specifically said this. He says, we created, humans created the Christian God, and then they denied that they created it. So it's really interesting. Like we have this whole system, capitalism. Like in the first book I write, if you went up to a feudal lord in the 1400s and said, you know, someday these serfs are going to ride horses to the factory and be paid in shillings, he would say, no. Feudalism is the highest, it's the acme of civilization, right? And someday someone's going to look back on us and they're going to say, like, those morons, you know, they had to use iPhones. They didn't realize they could telepathically communicate. right?
Yeah.
You know,
No, you're right.
Like, but so if you're in this present moment and you realize that everything that we're doing is contingent and arbitrary, you know, then you have a new perspective on life. You don't have to give your finger to the person who cuts you off on the road.
Sure.
You could be like, oh, maybe they're going to the hospital because the wife is giving birth. The question you're really asking me is, do I know when I'm being a dick?
Yeah.
And
I mean, I overthought myself out of many relationships.
Oh,
So,
I've overthought myself.
Yeah.
I don't think you can overthink. You either know that you're being a dick and then you fucking stop it, or you double down and you continue
You just
being
keep
a
pushing it
dick,
all the way
and then
the
you
end.
you vote yourself off the island.
Okay. Because it's hard sometimes. I mean, you want to.
No, it's not.
No,
you're either a dick or you're not a dick. That's not hard.
So how do you become more compassionate or empathetic towards other people while you're having these thoughts about them because you're overthinking X, Y, or Z?
You have to be able to say, wow, I'm really triggered right now. I'm not showing up as my highest self. I'm showing up as my wounded child. I'm trying to be right. I'm trying to manipulate. I'm trying to get ego gratification, and then say, is that in accord with who I want to be and what I'm doing? Like I want love, so I have to show up that way rather than, you know, just wanting to have 2 seconds of, you know, ego gratification. You know, what's that? The quote is, instant gratification takes too long. And so, so you just have to understand that, again, set tiny goals,
Sure.
you know, like, oh, I'm going to swim 750, you know, but when you say to yourself, I will not be happy until I have $10 million in the bank, also know that pretty soon after you have that money in the bank, you're going to be like, no, I was wrong. It's 15 million. There's no there. There's no there.
You're
there.
so right.
There's
You're
no there.
so
There.
right.
The
I
mind
mean,
is a hedonic treadmill.
Yeah.
And so again, it's like being present, having little victories that don't hurt other people. You know, like I'm gonna meditate today,
Sure.
or I'm going to go for a swim or play tennis or something like that. That to me is where we are now in terms of existentialism. You know, we're self-regulating and we're congruent and we're present and we're trying to be authentic and we understand our own triggers and we can recuse ourselves when we know that we're being an asshole and, you know, things like that.
I like that. I'm going to take that one step further because you talked about instant gratification. Now, how have modern societal changes in technology, whether that's advancements in social media, communications, being able to get to space, all of these different things, influence existential themes in our now present day relationships, whether platonic or intimate?
Well, the problem really comes down to anxiety.
Yeah.
Like all the things that you think are going to bring you this fulfillment are actually the cause of your anxiety. And then when you don't attain them, they cause depression. So you know, like George Bernard Shaw, but it's also attributed to Oscar Wilde, say there's two tragedies in American life. One is attaining your goals and one is not attaining your goals. Okay. So just know that in my book, The Systems of Thought,
How to Survive Your Childhood.
now that you're an adult, like I analyze these systems of thought and then I juxtapose it with if this person was on a desert island, lived on a desert island with their tribe and there was no money and they just ate fish and climbed trees, would they have this thing that's listed in the 900 pages of the DSM that I have to put on a diagnosis code so that they can pay insurance? And, you know, more
There's
often...
900 pages in the DSM now? DSM-5?
Yeah.
Is it still called DSM-5?
DSM-5, yeah.
Okay.
And with the appendix. So you don't want to remove the appendix of the DSM. You can remove my appendix, but not that appendix. So again, I don't know, just...
I mean, you said anxiety. I like something that you said there. You said, you know, it creates anxiety, which then if we don't achieve what we expect to achieve, it creates depression. I mean, I like the quote of happiness is measured by expectancy versus reality.
Right.
Because if you're expecting something and you're not getting what you expect or believe you should have, your reality is different from your expectancy.
And then you're going to be depressed.
You're going to be depressed about it.
Yeah.
And I think that goes into our last part of the show is it's uncertainty. I mean, I have spoken to so many different youth throughout my experience as a college counselor, so many different clients as an attorney, and everything is always about that. It's the same thing. It's uncertainty. It's always what's to come. Give me my exposure. What's going to happen if I don't get into this college? I mean, there's always this level of uncertainty that's become more and more prevalent, especially the more outside information and information downloading that we have. Uncertainty has become the theme to our daily lives. So what are some strategies to manage this feeling of uncertainty?
Your mind has 3 file cabinets: past, present, and future. And it keeps on filing shit from the past into the future.
Shit from the past into the future, skipping the present.
Right. Because what it's trying to do is preclude that trauma, humiliation, hurt, feeling of failure from occurring again. Right? So that's those are all your defense mechanisms of thinking about contingencies. Well, if this happens, then I'll do this. Well, if this happens, if I have a parking ticket, then I'll do this. If the car gets towed, I'll do this. If the brakes call, I'll call the warranty person. You know, and your mind is just like not able to just sit here and not do that psychotic thing of filing your traumas from the past into imaginary futures, so that if it occurs, you're like, ah, fuck, I knew I was going to break my ankle later. It really hurt when I broke my ankle. So,
I was expecting it.
Right.
Yeah. That's interesting. So, like, is there what do you say to patients that come in with anxiety, even like younger children, or I don't know if you work with patients that are younger than adolescence age, but my thing is, how do you navigate in this world where uncertainty is always in your face? It's always being downloaded, whether it's on your phone or on the computer or at work. Uncertainty has become more and more of a theme of our daily lives, in my opinion, from the experiences I've had with the people I speak to on a daily.
But uncertainty is the precondition of reality. So the sooner you accept that and know that your mind is trying to get ready for bad things to happen, and so you're causing your own anxiety by anticipating that bad things are going to happen. So you can flip it and have a sense of wonder and create the preconditions for astonishment. Dude, man, I didn't want to fucking drive to LACMA on Friday, right? I knew it was going to be
a lot of traffic.
There's a lot of traffic. There's a lot of traffic Friday afternoon. But again, so Joshua White, and I don't understand the vocabulary that the gentlemen have, but the astonishment that they had with each other's playing conveyed to me this like higher thing that I don't think I'll ever understand, but it just, again, like a rocket ship taking off. It's like, wow, that's amazing. That's defying gravity. I can't do that. I can't, I'll just, so
I can talk about it.
Yeah. But so I created the preconditions for me to have astonishment by going to these jazz shows.
So you think wonder, tying this all back in, wonder creates order? Because you're no longer all over the place.
The map is not the territory,
Fair
so
enough.
I can't say for other people. But when I tell people to go to a museum and stand in front of a Ellsworth Kelly painting or a Barnett Newman or a Rothko or something, because I know what Rothko's intention was, and so if I can get that person to be like I'm just letting these colors wash over me. I'm not thinking about my mortgage. I'm not thinking about...
That gave me anxiety, just the word mortgage. I'm like, don't say the M word in here. This is a safe space.
M word. This is a safe
space
don't
here.
Say
Yeah,
it. It's so fucked up how people think they're smart if they invested in real estate 20 years ago. Yeah. It's just like you rode a wave of low interest rates, and now everyone complains. Even Scott Galloway was on yesterday saying like the difference between 4% and 6% interest rates are different. It's thousands of dollars a month.
It's a huge income difference.
Dude, I remember my parents when we got the first house, it was 14% the interest rate. That's not crazy. That's normal. The craziness.
But you're borrowing less, though. I mean, assuming back then you were.
Craziness is the concept of debt and borrowing money. Like I had a guy come in the office the other day. He said, "I'm not buying a house unless I can pay cash for it, because if you calculate a 30-year mortgage and buy a $1 million house, you're actually paying $2.5 million."
Wow.
So people don't think like that. People, like someone else came into the office and they were like, "Yeah, I just started paying the the principal. Like I've owned the house for 20 years and I've just been paying interest. And then now in the last 5 years, I get to pay principal. That's a fucked up concept.
Yeah.
I mean, like you're going to your job, and if you don't love your job, again, you're trying to make this money to pay your monthly nut, your mortgage, and your auto insurance or your whatever it is, and it's not slavery. You know, you're not being whipped, but you have to understand that you have bought into a system where you're this hamster.
You're tied to debt.
You're tied to debt.
You have to go to work tomorrow.
Whether it's a student loan or credit card, all these bubbles, or the housing thing, like you fed into a system, and you can't check out because then you're homeless. And you don't have friends because, or you have homeless friends.
You don't have the Aloe boxers anymore.
Right. You don't have that. You can't go to Air One. You know, there's a guy at the door and he's like, no. You know, so, you just, we're all looking for our tribe. We all want to be loved unconditionally. We can't have that. America is the giant resentment factory. I'm just summarizing.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about so many great topics too. I mean,
it's all the same thing to me.
It's all
why we think the shit that we think. And most people, 90% of their thoughts.
Wait, actually, that's the title. Maybe I do why we think the shit that we think.
Right.
Because I was going to call it existentialism, but now you just made me think even harder.
It's the same thing. Yeah.